the door and ran away, and Lorna stood before me. But she did not stand for an instant. When she saw what I was like, at the risk of all thick bandages, and upsetting a dozen medicine bottles, and scattering leeches right and left, she managed to get into my arms, although they could not hold her. She laid her panting warm young breast on the place where they meant to bleed me, and she set my pale face up, and she would not look at me, having greater faith in kissing. I felt my life come back and warm. I felt my trust in a woman flow. I felt the joys of living now, and the power of doing it. It is not a moment to describe. Who feels can never tell of it. But the rush of Lorna tears, and the challenge of my bride's lips, and the throbbing of my wife's heart, now at last at home of mine, made me feel that the world was good, and not a thing to be weary of. Little more have I to tell. The doctor was turned out at once, and slowly came back my former strength, with my darling wife, and good victuals. As for Lorna, she never tired of sitting and watching me eat and eat. And such is her heart that she never tires of being with me here and there among the beautiful places, and talking with her arm around me, so far at least as it can go, though half of mine may go around her, of the many fears and troubles, dangers and discouragements, and worst of all the bitter partings, which we used to have, somehow. There is no need for my farming harder than becomes a man away. Lorna has great stores of money, though we never draw it out, except for some poor neighbour, unless I find her a sumptuous dress out of her own perquisite, and this she always looks upon as a wondrous gift from me, and kisses me much when she puts it on, and walks like the noble woman she is. And yet I may never behold it again, for she gets back to her simple clothes, and I love her the better in them. I believe that she gives half the grandeur away, and keeps the other half for the children. As for poor Tom Faggus, every one knows his bitter adventures, when his pardon was recalled, because of his journey to Exmoor. Not a child in the country, I doubt, but knows far more than I do of Tom's most desperate doings. The law had ruined him once, he said, and then he had been too much for the law; and now that a quiet life was his object, here the base thing came after him. And such was his dread of this evil spirit, that being caught upon Barnstaple bridge, with soldiers at either end of it, yet doubtful about approaching him, he set his strawberry mare, Sweet Winnie, at the left hand parapet, with a whisper into her dove-coloured ear. Without a moment's doubt she leaped it into the foaming tide, and swam, and landed according to orders. Also his flight from a public house, where a trap was set for him; but when he came, and broke down the door, and put two men under, and trod on them, is as well known as any ballad. It was reported for a while that poor Tom had been caught at last, by means of his fondness for liquor, and was hanged before Taunton jail. But luckily we knew better. With a good wife, and a wonderful horse, and all the county attached to him, he kept the law at a wholesome distance, until it became too much for its master, and a new king arose. Upon this Tom sued his pardon afresh, and Jeremy Stickles, who suited the times, was glad to help him in getting it, as well as a compensation. Thereafter the good and respectable Tom lived a godly, though not always sober, life, and brought up his children to honesty, as the first of all qualifications. My dear mother was as happy as possibly need be with us, having no cause for jealousy, as others arose around her, and everybody was well pleased when Lizzie came in one day and tossed her bookshelf over, and declared that she would have Captain Blockham, and nobody should prevent her; for that he alone, of all the men she had ever met with, knew good writing when he saw it, and could spell a word when told, as he had now succeeded to Captain Stickle's position, Stickles going up the tree, and had the power of collecting and of keeping what he liked. There was nothing to be said against it, and we hoped that he would pay her out. I sent little Ensie to Brundale School, at my own cost and charges; have changed his name, for fear of what any one might do to him. I called him Ensie Jones, and we got him a commission; and after many scruples of spirit, he did great things in the Low Countries. He looks upon me as his father, and without my leave will not lay claim to the heritage and title of the Doones, which clearly belong to him. Ruth Huckaback is not married yet, although upon Uncle Reuben's death she came into all his property, except, indeed, £2,000, which Uncle Ben, in his direst manner, bequeathed to Sir John Ridd, the worshipful knight, for greasing of the testator's boots; and he left almost a mint of money, not from the mine, but from the shop, and the good use of usury; for the mine had brought in just what it cost, when the vein of gold ended suddenly, leaving all concerned much older, and some, I fear, much poorer. But no one uttered ruin, as is the case with most of them. Ruth herself was his true mind, as upon deathbed he found. I know a man even worthy of her, and though she is not very young, he loves her, as I love Lorna. It is my firm conviction that in the end he will win her, and I do not mean to dance again, except at dear Ruth's wedding, if the floor be strong enough. Of Lorna, of my lifelong darling, of my more and more loved wife, I will not talk; for it is not seemly that a man should exalt his pride. Year by year her beauty grows, with the growth of goodness, kindness, and true happiness; above all with loving. For change she makes a joke of this, and plays with it, and laughs at it; and then, when my slow nature marvels, back she comes to the earnest thing. And if I wish to pay her out for something very dreadful, as may happen once or twice, when we become too gladsome, I bring her to forgotten sadness, and to me for cure of it, by the two words, Lorna Doone. End of chapter 75. Recording by Daisy 55. End of Lorna Doone, a romance of Exmoor, by Richard Doddridge Blackmore.